Hey there, Parker X listeners. This is Brett Wood coming at you today with a conversation with Vanessa Solesbee, the Parking and Transit Manager for the Town of Estes Park in Colorado. In this conversation, we'll talk about how she found her way into the parking business and eventually to Estes Park, the work building a program in Estes Park and adapting during COVID, the importance of community outreach, collaboration, and building consent when implementing new parking policies in a community like Estes Park, and finally, helping the community grow and become more resilient through her work. Hope you enjoy.
Okay, hey, so welcome to Parker X. Brett Wood. I'm here with Vanessa Solesbee, who is the Town of Estes Park. Can you give us your official position at Estes Park and how long you been there?
Yeah, so jack of all trades, but in real life, it's the parking and transit manager. And I've been with the town since the fall of 2018. So not very long, but before that, I was a consultant. So I just decided to stay.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. And yeah, we actually consulted together
I
pre Estes
think I
Park.
remember that.
Yeah, we were in different offices, but we were in the same company. So, well, I'm so glad to have you on. I've heard you talk at a couple of the shop talks about just what's going on in Estes Park and how y'all have been evolving over the last year, and really excited to kind of hear that story and share it with our listeners. But before we get started, maybe you could give us kind of just your background and how you've gotten into the parking world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like many, I didn't grow up wanting to be a parking professional and just kind of fell into the industry and loved it and decided to stay. So, my background, way back when I finished graduate school, I had an eye for a political career. I think maybe that'll be my third career someday, but we'll see if I still have the energy after a career in parking. But I finished graduate school and I went to work for the Texas State Senate, was a communications director and a press secretary, and I really loved that role. I soon found out I wasn't going to be making even enough money to pay my student loan bills. So I jumped into a much more lucrative field, nonprofit management. So right away, I went from a low to a little bit lower, but I loved the work. And that's what led me to my role in Cedar Rapids at the downtown district. I was fortunate enough to start as the marketing director there, but then get promoted to vice president and operations manager. And I really enjoyed working with the downtown business community. I was heavily involved with event planning, but also with infrastructure management as well. I maintained our streetscape, benches and trees. And after the devastating flood that hit Cedar Rapids, which I'm sure is a long memory now that that community has faced the derecho last year, I had the opportunity to get really involved with rebuilding and revitalizing the parking system, which at that point, our offices were on the ground floor. All of our files were paper. So it was a real building effort in partnership with the city of Cedar Rapids. And we lost meters, we lost facilities, we actually lost an entire parking structure. And I, quite frankly, knew nothing about parking management, but I did know a lot about community building and working with people on a common goal. And as long as I had been at my role at the downtown district, parking was always top of mind. And so I was lucky to have a strong foundation with some of the key downtown property and business owners to be able to kind of pull that group together and start working on rebuilding and reimagining the parking system in Cedar Rapids. And honestly, the rest is history. I haven't looked back, although sometimes when I'm very, very tired.
I always find it fascinating. Cedar Rapids is one of very few communities where the downtown organization is heavily involved in parking. There's Ann Arbor, there's Tempe, there's a handful of others, but I always felt like the bids when they were involved with parking, the community touch, the customer service feel shines through like no other organization. So I wish that had caught on more over the last couple decades, but y'all did some really excellent things at Cedar Rapids. And so after Cedar Rapids, you went into consulting, and that's where our paths crossed, and we worked together in the consulting world for a while. But now you're at Estes Park and have been there for a couple of years. And one of those years in the past year was obviously different than the two before that. But pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, like what were some of the things that you were doing at Estes Park from a parking and transportation and transit perspective to kind of improve the community? What type of problems were you dealing with? Because it's not a traditional community; it's heavily tourism based. So what types of things were going on there?
Yeah, so I was immediately drawn to Estes Park when I had the opportunity to work there as a consultant. And one of the challenges that I saw was that parking was largely unmanaged. There were no time limits. There were very limited permit offerings, no enforcement, and in a community that was seeing 4 to 5 million visitors over the course of a summer, flooding in from all over the world. So it was this really interesting case study in almost having a game day like situation from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And there was no parking management. And I enjoyed my consulting role there so much that I decided to stick around, and not to mention it's a beautiful place to live. But I had a tall list of responsibilities when I joined the staff as both the parking and transit manager. In addition to building a new parking program, I'm also responsible for the management of our seasonal shuttle system. We serve 5 routes, about 55 stops throughout the town of Estes Park, again, from that Memorial Day through that Labor Day timeframe. So both of those items were underneath my purview. And the good news is that the town of Estes Park had invested heavily in creating a downtown parking management plan. So they really understood the need to put some focus on operational analysis and not just on kind of the big picture planning. And there had been a zillion parking studies stretching back to, I think the mid 90s, but this was really focused on operations and it was really focused on data collection and making data driven decisions. So I really liked that piece of the plan. And so when I started, I was asked to build a staff, identify technology that could be used to not only monitor our public parking areas, but also provide some sort of real-ish time parking availability information using, the web and mobile app for our guests. We installed some dynamic messaging signs, again, to help direct traffic and identify parking locations. And so in addition to that, one of the interesting things was that I had an extremely small budget to work with that included staff, technology, everything else. And so I am just fortunate to have connected with some terrific vendor partners who were willing to push themselves beyond, I think, what their technology was planned to do. And we were able to piece things together. And so we used mobile and fixed LPR. We used a camera-based system. So a collection of different counting systems. We connected that to an app, a white label app. And we were able to roll that all out within the first 6 or 7 months of my joining the team. We had the first ever parking ambassadors. And in that first summer, not only did I get to build the program, but I got to work in it too. So I was out there driving the parking enforcement vehicle and helping customers in the field. So really is that jack of all trades that I mentioned at the beginning. But it was such a learning experience. Rarely do you have the opportunity to step into every single role that you're being asked to build and manage. And so that was a really fun learning experience for me. Fun and trying. I think I worked, 70 straight days or something, but I now have a much better understanding of my entire operation from start to finish. So that is the journey that we were headed down, and we collected a ton of data, and it told us what the parking studies since the early 90s have been telling us, that we have extremely high parking utilization. People are not moving. We have tons of traffic congestion, and we need to do more. And so we started to move through kind of our spectrum of parking alternatives, unmanaged parking, time limited parking, and into our journey towards seasonal paid parking that had been approved through an extensive public process. And we were hot and heavy working that out and implementing that, and then COVID. So yeah, so it's been an interesting couple of years. It's not been that long, 2.5 years, but we have done a lot here in Estes Park with very little money.
Well, it's fascinating. So building a program from the ground up just sounds like a ton of fun. Like it's not like inheriting a program where you come in and you just kind of keep the ship moving in the right direction. Building it up just sounds very intriguing. And I've had the opportunity to work in places where, with you actually, in like Aurora, Colorado, where we designed that. But to see it and drive the ship as it gets going, that's really incredible. And you get to do enforcement, which is one of my favorite things to do. So
It was fun.
it's a lot of fun. But you hit on one of the things that I think is essential for communities, whether they're building from the ground up or they're working, with an already established program, is the community outreach, the communication side of things, because you don't go from zero to paid parking without engaging stakeholders, business owners, employees, residents. And that's one of the things that I've always admired you for, from your downtown days to your consulting days, is the ability to tell that story and build consensus. What was it like in Estes Park? What kind of things did you do, and how difficult was it to get the community to realize that there needed to be some significant changes?
Yeah, so community outreach and engagement is always at the top of my priority list. As you know, when we worked together, it was a real focus area of mine in consulting. And I hopefully your audience is not PG, because I just saw a terrific analogy sent out by a group here in Colorado called Community Builders, and they do a lot of training for governments. And they just sent out a blog this week called "Community Engagement is Not a One Night Stand." And while cheeky, the point is very accurate. When I came to Estes Park, it wasn't a one night stand. I was in it for the long haul, not just dating, married, you're committed, here I am, I'm never leaving you. So whether that's been a good thing or a bad thing in the eyes of the community, we did a year-long process with the downtown parking management plan. So that was a year worth of community engagement, meetings and survey, man on the street intercept, conversation. So we really had a wide variety of engagement as we were making that plan. As we moved into implementation, that outreach and engagement continued, especially as we worked through our first year and we explored different types of technologies. And we wanted to keep people informed about our decision-making process and where we were. We're implementing time-limited parking. Why are we doing that? What are these parking permits, and who are they for? What are the steps that go into defining whether or not a community is ready for seasonal paid parking? We didn't want to surprise anybody. So after that year-long planning effort, we kept engaging the community again through traditional and non-traditional means. Farmers markets, surveys, et cetera. We were everywhere, working not only with our community, with our different business associations. And we really just wanted to continue that conversation about where we were within implementation of the downtown parking management plan. And that also included a 4-step town board meeting process, public hearings. We are committed, not only through planning, but through implementation, to be extremely transparent about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and trying to tie it back to that why is so critical, because this is not about making people's lives miserable. It's about improving the vitality of our community. For years and years, and I was actually looking at a transportation study this morning back from 2003, 90%, 96% utilization in our parking areas. People were asking for paid parking in intercept surveys done back in the early aughts. And it's taken the community a while to get used to that idea. And I think that the reason that we were successful this time was because we have continued and are continuing to reach out and engage the community. I'm a big believer in informed consent. We're not going to get everybody agreeing with us, but at least we can bring them into the conversation and hopefully make allies. instead of enemies. And while we can't capture everybody, we definitely, we don't want to catch anybody off guard.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the informed consent is an amazing approach, because the education that goes in with that, the transparency that goes in with that, even if they don't agree with you, they understand why you're doing it, and it's not something that is being forced on them, but something that was a collaborative process where they saw their colleagues working side by side with them to get to that decision. So that's fantastic, and I hope the folks that listen to this podcast understand that and implement that in their communities and campuses as well, because talking to people is critically important. So, okay, so you've spent a year building consent, and then a global pandemic happened. So I'm assuming you just sit on your hands for a year. Nothing happens in Estes Park in 2020.
Yeah, we were like a cartoon cat screeching to a halt in spring of 2020. We had, $100,000 worth of technology sitting in our parking structure. I mean, we were down the road. But I credit, our town leadership, and especially the parking operator that we were able to bring on last year with helping us make sure that we didn't have any negative financial impact to the town, but we could hit the pause button. And so we were incredibly fortunate. And, we did that early. I talked to our town administrator in mid-March, and we were able to go to the town board in early April because I knew that we needed to make a decision kind of one way or the other. So we hit the pause button on paid parking. However, we had so many other things going on and so many opportunities that we were able to leverage during the pandemic. As I mentioned, we had brought a new operator on board. So we allowed them to have a full season working with our staff, our technology. We were able to roll out some of the new parking permits for employees and employers that we had been, again, engaging the community on. What do you feel you need? Where do you want to park? So we were able to test out some of that without the volume of people, without also rolling out paid parking. So there was some benefit to the parking operation as well. And then we were able to introduce the town's first fully electric trolley bus. So it's a trolley replica vehicle. So it looks like the old-fashioned trolley, fully battery electric. And we will actually be bringing a second vehicle on this year. So 40% of our fleet will be battery electric. And we are really looking forward to that integration as well. And we were able to write a lot of grants. So we were able to secure grant funding to build our first transit facility last year. And we will also be working on some parking lot redesign and reconfiguration to make the transit hub experience better for our riders. And we were able to pilot, and then hopefully it will be coming back this year, a regional connection with the Denver metro area. So Estes Park is a beautiful community, but it's about an hour and a half drive from the Denver International Airport. We're a bit isolated. Beyond our limited public transportation offering, we have a few private companies, but not much. So one of our big long-term goals is to move to year-round public free transportation in Estes Park, and also connect ourselves with the metro region and some of the other really popular areas like Boulder and Fort Collins. So we were able to shift our focus largely to transit. And then I was able to step into role as administrator of the Estes Valley Resiliency Collaborative, which was a public-private group that came together to work on pandemic response and recovery. And I enjoyed that tremendously, working with the business community and being able to get involved with that sort of resiliency work, built the connections that I think will help me be even more successful in my relationship building and outreach related to parking this year. So I'm just wrapping that up, and it was a lot of work, but the benefit to being able to meet so many people and work on a joint project together, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think it built and strengthened some really key relationships.
That's excellent. Yeah, that continues to build the trust and transparency. So that's good. And a lot going on. How was last summer in Estes Park? I mean, did you see? Yeah, obviously, I'm sure you saw reduced visitation, but how did the businesses survive?
It's such an interesting community. I was just actually being a good IPMI member and filling out my trends survey, and I felt like I would probably be an outlier. So when the data is crunched, that's probably me. But we were busy. And, we had locked down like everybody else did. But I think once those restrictions started to wane a little, like in July, people were so ready to get out of their homes, and they hopped in their cars and they headed to their national parks. They headed to their outdoor spaces. And so we saw a tremendous influx of visitors over the summer. And I will tell you, because we collect so much data, that our overall occupancy was down about 15% over 2019, but our busiest core lots, the ones that we had slated to go to paid parking last year and that will be going to paid parking this year, were as busy or more busy than 2019. So we actually, again, a bit of an outlier in that sense, because of the transient nature of our parkers. We also don't have a tremendous amount of office space in the downtown core. It's mostly retail. So again, we saw high visitation, and I can tell you that both our local tourism bureau as well as Rocky Mountain National Park have reported double-digit increases towards in November and December of visitation over 2019, up to, I think, 36% increase in December in visitation. So we know folks are traveling, they're just getting in their cars and doing it. And a lot of them are coming to Estes Park.
You definitely are an outlier. And the data I've been poring over for all the IPMI stuff we're doing is 40% is kind of the highest, 40% down from previous years. So to be down 15% or exceeding it in places of high demand is definitely not the norm. But that's great. So you're a couple of months away from the season really ramping up this year. What does the outlook for 2021 look like? Not only for Estes Park and visitation and the parks and things like that, but for your program and where it heads in the coming year.
Yeah, our outlook is really cautiously optimistic. We're in a similar position to where we were last year. We are in full throttle paid parking implementation mode. Back to the earlier conversation about outreach, I think I'm giving 8 or 9 presentations this week alone to community groups. So we are moving through that right now. We have really ratcheted back our revenue projections for paid parking. Originally we had based those projections on our last couple of years of data, but we just want to be more conservative and under promise and over deliver. So we're, again, cautiously optimistic on the paid parking implementation side. I mentioned that we're bringing on a new electric trolley, and we're going to start some design on our transit facility and our also on the parking lot redesign. So my goal is to move through this year in implementation of paid parking, and just to really focus on that as our one thing. I don't know if any of your listeners have read the book, The One Thing, but that is my one thing this year. And I keep telling everybody it's got to be excellence and implementation for paid parking. And then my hope is that the division, myself and my staff included, we can settle into a rhythm of a year or a couple of years where it's not these just full throttle, so much change happening, because we have to be aware of our community. And implementing paid parking is already a heavy lift for a community that's never had paid parking. We didn't rip it out in the 80s and we're bringing it back. Never. This is the first time they've had paid parking. So it's a big change. There's a lot of other big community projects going on, and I'm very conscientious about change and progress fatigue. And I really want to settle into a good rhythm and routine with the community, continue to collect data, but not shock the system every year with huge project, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously you got to get a running start when you get started, but I would assume you're probably not far away from a nice, steady, continued success there. So, well, kudos to you. You're doing excellent work there. You're a great example for communities that are looking to build parking management and build in parking operations in a place that they really haven't before. And I really appreciate the way you've gone about doing it with kind of the community-driven approach and the data-driven approach. So excellent job, and really happy to see you successful there in Estes Park. So I think that's about it for us. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, but I do appreciate you being on the podcast today and spending a little time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And I think the only thing I would add is that I have been so fortunate over my career, not just in parking, to be able to get a boost and stand on the shoulders of so many other tremendous parking professionals and to learn from so many colleagues over the years, present company included, that I feel like anything I can do to make this program strong and successful contributes to the validity and strength of our industry as a whole. And that I feel like is the giving back thing that we all need to do, because I say this often, but the parking and transportation mobility industry is the most welcoming and kind set of folks that would share everything with you. And so I feel like I've gotten the best training and continue to get the best training, and we'll definitely pay it back. So if you visit estes.org/parking, you can find me. I'm happy to answer your questions, and more than happy to share what we've learned and are continuing to learn here in Estes Park.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and to appreciate your time, and go hit the slopes.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Parker X podcast. We sincerely appreciate it and hope you are enjoying our content. Please remember to rate, review, comment, subscribe, and share. And follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The following has been a production of Parker X.